Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Sweet Talk. I'm Candice Durham, your host, and I am the co founder and CEO here at the B Suite. I'm so excited to have everybody here with us today as we dive into a super hot topic and one of the most pressing topics for school leaders, which is hiring season. I know from lots of experience that this time of year can be incredibly overwhelming, but we are here to let you know that it does not have to be like that. So, our goal for today is to leave you with actionable strategies, expert insights, and resources that will help you tackle recruitment and retention with confidence. So, to help us do that, I am joined by an incredible panel of talent leaders who bring a wealth of experience and expertise in education, talent management, and organizational culture. So let me introduce you to first Brittany Johnson. Brittany Johnson is the Director of People Operations at Great Schools, North Carolina. She has over 14 years of experience helping organizations optimize their operations, nurture top talent, and build thriving cultures. Her blend of strategic insight and practical solutions has transformed countless teams and systems. Brittany, we're so glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Candice. I'm
And
excited to be here.
absolutely. Next, let's welcome Lindsey Steele, a people culture and program senior consultant. Lindsey is a heart-centric leader with almost 2 decades of experience in guiding organizations to imagine, manifest, and create transformative outcomes. Her expertise spans everything from talent and recruitment to strategic planning and curriculum design. Lindsey, such an honor to have you join us today.
Thank you. Happy to be a part of the conversation today, Candice.
And then finally, we have Nikeitha Brown, a senior consultant in learning and leadership development. Nikeitha brings nearly 2 decades of experience across education, technology, and social impact. She started as an eighth grade math teacher, tough subject to teach, and and since became a leader in equity, leadership development, and systemic change. With advanced degrees from Texas A&M and Harvard, Nikeitha works continuously to inspire sustainable impact with organizations. Nikeitha, so excited to have your insights with the community today.
Happy to be here. Thrilled to be a part of the conversation.
All right. So here's how our session is going to flow. So we're going to start with a panel discussion where our experts are going to share their unique insights on recruitment and retention challenges, followed by a special segment where each of our panelists will share a resource, tool, or strategy that you can use and implement right away to help strengthen your efforts at your school. And then we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. So be sure to drop yours in the chat as we go along. So we have a lot to cover, so I'm excited to jump right in. So let's get started with our panel. To kick things off, I would love to discuss the most common mistakes that schools make during hiring season. I, for one, believe that one of the biggest mistakes is forgetting that recruitment and retention is a year-round process. It's not just within the season, though we do highlight, this specific time. But I would love to hear from our experts, starting with Brittany. In your opinion, what is the most common mistake that you see schools make during hiring season?
The most common mistake that I see schools make is starting too late. I see a lot of schools start their recruitment retention process in the spring, and I truly believe that it is something that should start in the fall. Like you said, Candice, recruitment and retention is a year-long process, and so the earlier that schools dive into it, the better off they'll be. And I think there is a way to intentionally do that. There are certain events that you can do in the fall and maybe lead into the spring, but starting in the spring feels just a little too late for me.
And what would you say would be the top priority for a school that, say, is just now getting started?
Yep. So top priority is having retention conversations. If you haven't already, being clear about your teachers and school leaders who are either leaving the profession entirely, moving to another campus, moving to another grade level, and then jumping into how do we fill these roles.
And Lindsey, what would you say is a common mistake that you've seen?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think one of the themes that bubbles up for me is around communication. And I think one of the biggest pitfalls is just the lack of clear and transparent communication around the hiring process, right? In my experience, what I've seen in past instances is hiring protocols, systems, and processes where communication is um, there, but then what happens is that one thing is said in one breath and another thing is in a different breath, right? And it reminds me of the James Baldwin quote, I don't believe what you say because I see what you do, right? So really aligning, right, your processes to actually what the communication is that you're spearheading and what you're actually telling your audience. So I think one of the things that is really important here is to really have strong and consistent lines of communication open with your hiring process, and making sure you have systems of checks and balances in place as well to ensure you are communicating transparently and clearly to potential candidates and ensuring they have the information they need throughout the entire process, right? To build trust, rapport, and consistency as you formulate your dream team for your school and your school community.
Absolutely. And I would just add to that communication key and being transparent is like a huge key to creating a positive candidate experience. And we know that having a positive candidate experience leads to things like referrals, right? It leads to having to minimize the amount of recruitment that you're doing because folks are going to advocate for the organization that you have because they've had such a great experience. And communication is definitely key to that. Nikeitha, what about you? What is a common mistake that you've seen schools make?
Yeah, I love what I'm hearing. I want to also add to this transparency conversation, and I would even extend that to salary transparency. So knowing upfront what range or what budget we're working with, or if you're having potential funding issues for the role and you're counting on partnerships, like communicating that from the onset really builds trust with the candidate. But I would say the most common mistake that I've seen in my experiences is hiring too based on heavily on potential and not thinking about the long-term impact on children. And so one thing that I've seen is we're hiring because we have roles that we need to quickly fulfill, right? There is that pressure going on, but often that strategy backfires, right? Because at the end, it further reproduces inequity. And so I would say that is one of the most common things I've seen, just weighing too heavily on potential and thinking we can build a teacher, build an educator as they go.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's shift gears a little bit to thinking about retention. So, in you all's opinion, how can schools really balance their ongoing recruitment efforts with also retaining their existing team? I think a lot of times, we try to focus on one thing and then another ball is dropped. So, how can we balance that out? Let's start with Lindsey. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually love this question because I adore balance. So I appreciate you asking this, Candice. I think it's really important. I think it's a two-pronged approach. I don't think it's an or, right? I think it is an and, right? Balancing two sides of the point. So how are you prioritizing retention and investing in your staff in as one spotlight, where the spotlight, right, is on? And then how are you also strategically hiring? And I think you can do that really well if you're strategically planning. So if you're investing in your current staff, right, and you have staff that wants to stay, you have less retention issues, right? So really thinking about how you are providing professional development opportunities to allow your current staff to stretch their learning edges, right? How are you making equitable spaces and inclusive spaces for your staff to feel valued and appreciated, right? How are you building in feedback systems where there are ways for your staff to feel like their voices are heard and their voices are valued? Right? And so really making sure that you are creating a culture of vibrancy and wellness and success, but inclusion as you're kind of working through your team in the hiring season. In addition to that, though, the spotlight also has to be on hiring, right? So if you do have roles to fill, how are you strategically hiring for these positions? And I think you could do that through really thinking about what specific needs do you have for certain roles, right? And then looking at things like cultural fit, right? How does that particular person fit into your school's vision, mission, and values? And really making sure you are doing both well, but a lot of that deals with, right, baking time in for strategic planning for both of those things to happen at the same time.
Absolutely. Brittany, what are your thoughts?
Yep, I love a lot of what Lindsey shared, specifically going back to what she shared in the first question that you asked about communication. So something that I've seen schools do really successfully is start having retention conversations very early. And having worked at a founding school where we were adding a grade every year, some teachers had expressed, I want to move up with my kids. I want to, become a DOI, or I want to go join the culture team. And so having those conversations early meant we were clear about, we know we're not going to retain this teacher in this space. And so that leads into how we plan for recruitment. If I know the 8th grade science teacher is interested in becoming a DOI, I am focusing first on 8th grade science, right? And creating spaces where retention is not a taboo conversation, right? Creating spaces in which teachers can say, I want to move. I've worked at a larger network before this. And so there was, this campus is opening down the street from my house and I want to go there because it takes 5 minutes to get there versus the 30 minutes it takes to get here. And so creating spaces where teachers can have those conversations, I think, one, builds a community in which retention is not taboo and allows leadership teams to plan accurately for recruitment.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought up the fact that, retention doesn't have to be like this bad word. Like, we don't have to shy away from having those conversations because they're important, right? And if we try to pretend like it doesn't exist, we're not going to, progress in the talent management cycle and the talent life cycle, right? Like, talent life cycles come to an end for certain people, and that's okay. And we have to be okay with that, being the reality of things. Nikeitha, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I love what I'm hearing. I would just echo a few things in this conversation about retention, having the same way that exit interviews and exit surveys are important, stay conversations also have to be important. You want to hear why people are motivated to stay within the community. Is it the growth and development opportunities? Is it the short commute? Is it the cater lunches on Wednesday? And so being very intentional on those conversations will help leaders understand the competitive advantage that they have as a school. And so using that data, that those data insights from those conversations will allow you to be able to advocate for your school to prospective educators, or why this may be the school for you. And so I think when we talk about the conversation of retention efforts, those stay conversations are just as important as the exit conversations.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about what Lindsey was mentioning around equity and inclusion in the process. And I know, we're in this odd space in the world where DEI is going out the window for certain organizations, but here at BC, and I think amongst this group of talent leaders, building inclusive cultures and building inclusive teams and having equitable processes is still very important to us. So in you all's opinion, what role does equity play in building a strong and inclusive school team? And Lindsey, since you brought that up, I would love to hear your thoughts first.
Yes, this is so important. And I appreciate you also bringing up, Candice, the recent executive orders around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if there's not an even more important time, the time is now. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I think it is extremely critical and important. I think a couple of things come to mind. I think when you're leading with an equity lens in mind, right, you are able to value talent in a very different way. And what I think about is how the appreciation, celebration, recognition for individual and collective contributions comes to mind, right? When you really know your staff, you really know your school community, and you're leading with an equity lens, you're able to optimize and really shine the light on how folks are contributing to your school community. And I also think it's really important here to recognize how differentiation comes in play here, right? When you're leading with an equity lens in mind, what's really amazing is when you are able to understand the diverse needs of your school community and the individuals and staff that exist within that school building, and then tailor your support, right, to those specific needs of your community. And that in turn, I think, makes a lot of folks feel valued, feel appreciated, right, and really aligned to the vision and mission of the school.
Yeah, absolutely. Brittany, Nikeitha, thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I love what Lindsey shared. I think something that really stands out to me is like, how do we honor our staff, right? How do we honor the work that they're doing, the perspectives that they bring, how they show up in our school community every day? And I think if you don't think about equity, you don't think about diversity and inclusion, you are not honoring your staff, right? And then you've got a big retention problem, which leads to a big, recruitment effort. And so really love what Lindsey shared, and that's the only thing that I would add.
Oh, I love this. I would also add that as we're building, we're also thinking, how do we sustain? So equity plays a significant part in sustaining an inclusive team. And I would just add on this layer of how we treat staff. The equity in that also reflects on how educators treat children. And so when it's done in a powerful way, it can have a powerful impact in the classroom. So that's just one thing I would like to add.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a supervisor once, and she told me that talent is everyone's job. And I will never forget that. It is something that I live by. And I think that when we are leading with an equity lens, and equity and inclusion and even accessibility, right, are foundational in our organization's culture and in our talent efforts, then we are really thinking about how is everyone participating in the talent life cycle? How are we bringing our full community into that work? Because it's obviously it's a talent leader's job to lead those efforts, but I do believe that talent is a part of everyone's work within the school, because to you all's point, at the end of the day, the teachers that we have in classrooms and the leaders that we have leading our teachers, all of that funnels to our students and the outcomes that they have. And so if we aren't building the right culture internally within our staff, then what does that mean for kids, and what does that mean for the world if we aren't doing that consistently across schools and over time? So I think that foundation is incredibly important, and thank you all for your insights around that. And then I want to shift gears a little bit into like process and systems, because I think this is where a lot of folks can get caught up in what is going to save us the most time and what's going to make the most sense, and then trying to balance that with I want to see every teacher's 2-hour-long demo lesson, or something like that. So what are your thoughts on a common hiring process step that can be streamlined or even eliminated, that would save time and resources, but still make sure that schools are having a strong recruitment and hiring process? Let's start with Nikeitha.
Oh, I love this question. There's several reasons why I love this question. I want to say, before a candidate even meets anyone on the staff, your hiring process tells them a little bit about your story. It tells a little bit about the culture. And so one thing I would say that people can eliminate is the in-person interviews, especially in the initial steps. Provide some flexibility for candidates to have virtual interviews. It helps determine if that person is the right cultural fit. It saves time on both parties. And so I would say just the use of virtual interviews. And in addition to that, I would say something that can be a little bit more streamlined is the products that we are asking candidates to demonstrate. This is my personal opinion. Do not ask me to do tasks that you do not plan to use to make an informed decision about my candidacy. And so with that said, I've seen skill assessments and performance tasks, and also a demo lesson. And so you just really need to know what you're looking for. Like, what are the essential core skills that we are asking candidates to come in with on day one? How can they be excellent educators, and then design your recruitment process or their experience based off those core skills. So I would say some streamlining the performance tasks and the actual products we are asking candidates to demonstrate their excellence.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. Brittany, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, one thing that I would say, and this is my like personal hill to die on with processes, is let's not ask the candidate the same question in 4 different interviews, right? Like, so if we have a set of questions for our screening time, that's our screening questions. If we have a set of questions for in-person interviews, that is our set of questions, and they need to build on each other, right? There's no reason that candidates should be repeating their answer 6 times down the one. You shouldn't be having 6 interviews, but you should also not be, repeating that same answer, answering the same question over and over again. Let's like train our staff to be able to read interview notes, so that way they're not like, oh, I don't understand this, so I'm just going to ask the question again. I think that puts candidates in a really bad space.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many good points that are made here, and I was just thinking like, yes, as the ladies were speaking of. One of the things that I would just add is just around those specific interview questions, right? And I think both of the ladies touched on it around not having to repeat things over and over, right? I have been very frustrated in interview processes where I felt like I did one thing in phase 1 and I'm continuing to do those same things in phase 2 and 3 and so on. So I think when you're thinking about your interview questions, really looking at those and figuring out what is the thing or the skill that we need to assess, and how is the question actually assessing for that. So for example, I think that you can learn a lot through one very strong interview question, right? And so it doesn't have to be a slew of in a laundry list, right, of tons of questions. If you really have a strong question that's really getting to the targeted thing that you want to assess, you can really, really, I think, condense that hiring process and streamline some of those processes that you have in place.
Yeah. I agree with everything you all said. I, for one, love having a strong candidate profile to start with. Again, the foundation is everything, right? Like, and I think a lot of times folks want to jump to, all right, well, what is the process? What are the steps? What are we going to do, without having an understanding, like you all said, of what is it that we're actually looking for? What are the skills? What are the competencies? What are the mindsets that this person needs to have to be successful in this role, and really thinking through what that would look like if you found it. Because just asking a bunch of random questions you found on Google is not going to get you what you're looking for. And I think a lot of times the process is too lengthy because folks don't have a clear idea of what it is that they're actually looking for. So we got to start with that foundation. We have to start with that candidate profile. Because the truth is, you don't need 6 interviews, and sometimes you might not even need a performance task, and you don't need, as Brittany stated, the same questions over and over and over again. And I think the process could be significantly, dialed down and streamlined if we really just start with a strong candidate profile right at the beginning. What tools? Actually, let's talk a little bit about single site schools. So they have some unique challenges during hiring season because typically their staff is a lot smaller. I know, like Brittany and I, we've worked in larger CMOs that, have a talent team. There's multiple folks that are managing that process, but with single site schools, there's often, the principal or the head of school is managing hiring while also managing the school. So what are some tools or strategies that you think would be really effective for single site schools as they're managing hiring season? Let's start with Brittany, since I was just staring at you.
Yes. So I will say, full transparency, I have worked with larger schools, but one thing I do respect about smaller schools is just the intimacy of it, right? Like I get some time, before I have to, or in a larger network, I go through a slew of people. In a single site school, I really believe that they should capitalize on their intimacy, right? You don't go through a slew of people before you get to talk to somebody. You get to talk to the principal or the vice principal or the head of schools, right? And so really using that as your leverage, right? Like you didn't have to talk to a million people. You got right to me, and I can talk to you about what it looks like a day in the life in the school. And I can tell you which teacher you should go observe to see if this is the kind of thing that you want. And so I just really believe that that is the strength that single sites or smaller networks have.
Brittany, I'm wondering if you think that that same thought and strategy could be applied to larger networks or larger schools as systems as well.
I do think it can if there's a streamline, right? I think that if the talent partner and the principal are on the same page, then it is really easy to create that same experience. And that would require the talent partner and the principal working really closely together to say, like, hey, I have this candidate. I think this candidate is really good for you. Who on your school team would you recommend that I connect them with, right? So yeah, there is a way to do that at larger sites.
Lindsey, what are your thoughts?
I love what Brittany mentioned around intimacy, and I was actually going to. It's sort of in the same vein, but I was going to highlight relationship building and how smaller school sites can really optimize that skill set to really use it as a tool for hiring season. And I think it's things like how are they building relationships with local universities and colleges, right? Could they partner with local teacher ed programs, right, to build talent pipelines, right, for their recruitment process? Is it community partnerships, right, that they can also partner with and really think about how that could be expansive for attracting diverse candidates, right? But I also think, what about within the walls of their schools, right? How are you utilizing the staff that's within your school to build a really compelling story about your school site? And even though you may be small but mighty, right? We know that that can also be a huge asset as you're thinking about the hiring process.
Yeah, that employee value proposition, or that EVP, is incredibly important to the recruitment process, and making sure candidates understand, your organization, your culture, your goals, your vision, and who you all are as a team, so that when you are capturing the attention of really great talent, they're kind of locked into who you are, and then that's the place that they want to be, because it's hard out here in hiring. It's competitive. And you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. So definitely agree with that. Nikeitha, what are your thoughts?
I just want to share. I heard somebody. I love this intimacy as an asset for these smaller organizations. I also love partnering with different organizations to really build your talent pipeline. I wanted to add. I've worked with rural schools, and maybe they may not offer high salaries, but again, going back to knowing what your competitive advantage is, what are the rewards and benefits that you have to offer that goes beyond salary. And so it's not always about the money, right? People are looking for flexibility. People are looking for growth and development opportunities, but really knowing what you have to offer to candidates is something that I would highlight.
Absolutely. And then to sort of wrap this panel discussion up and connect these pieces between single site schools and larger organizations, what are your thoughts on how single site schools can compete with larger organizations for top talent? And I think a lot of that has to do with the relationships, but I'm wondering if there's any resources or tools that you all think would help folks in single site schools sort of streamline their work, their talent work. And sorry, Lindsey, let's start with you.
I'm thinking about this concept of storytelling and building a narrative. And we talked a little bit about that, so I'm going to try to weave it in to the question you asked. But I think, again, there is a beautiful opportunity and a huge opportunity, right, for smaller school sites to really focus on the assets that come along with being a smaller school site, right? And so how are you being able to package that, right, into what unique value add you can bring as a smaller school site, and how can you wrap that into a very compelling story where if I'm hearing this, I'm attracted and wanting, right, to work for your school or to come to your single school site and actually be a part of your team or community. So I think when you think about storytelling, that is a beautiful opportunity for a single school site to shine really, really well.
Brittany?
Yep, I think to build on what Lindsey is saying, something I think about is who is telling that story, right? And so if you are, a network that has like a really strong parent and family organization, how are you getting those folks to tell your story, right? Because when we're thinking like at the end of the day, this is about attracting the best talent so that we can ensure that our kids have what they need. And who better to tell you what kids need than their parents? And so that is what I would push for single school sites to do is like use your families, your community, back to that intimacy. Your community is there. They're in this work with you. Use your families to tell the narrative to the folks that you're trying to attract.
Nikeitha?
Yeah, I love what I'm hearing. I would add a tool. I think that's underutilized in the process of hiring would be AI to really build clear job descriptions of what you're looking for. And also AI can be used to personalize the candidate interactions, right? But also knowing that it's a foundation to build upon. And so using that tool to really streamline the process and provide a more intimate experience for your candidates would probably be the best tool that I could recommend.
And I will expand on that with another tech tool that I love, which are one-way video interview platforms. We use it here at the B Suite, and I absolutely love it. I think if you choose the right one that has the right features and is very simple and easy to use, it could really streamline the hiring process and eliminate some, the scheduling back and forth that we have and like phone screens and things like that. It also is pretty helpful for the candidate experience. Folks get to, sort of interview on their own time and their own pace. And, teachers are busy, right? And we have to remember that. And trying to schedule phone screens in the middle of a school day takes a teacher out of a classroom. And I personally don't like that. So I think using, different tech tools and platforms like one-way video platform could be incredibly helpful. All right, so this was a fantastic discussion. We're not done. We're going to shift gears a little bit, but thank you to our panelists for sharing your incredibly thoughtful insights and strategies. I hope that anyone who's watching right now is walking away with some new ideas and inspiration to tackle your hiring season. So we're going to keep the momentum going by diving deeper into solutions that you can start using right now. So each of our panelists has brought a resource, tool, or strategy that they've utilized to support recruitment and retention. These solutions are actionable. You can start exploring these right after this section. And we'll make sure that you have access to all of these tools and strategies and everything that we discuss in our follow-up blog post after today's talk. So we're going to get started with Lindsey. Lindsey, you've worked with so many purpose-driven organizations to help transform their recruitment retention efforts. What is your go-to resource or strategy that you would recommend to the school leaders watching?
Yeah, so I want to first just transparently share and self-disclose that I am a professional development nerd. So when I talk about the resource and tool, it's going to center around professional development because I think that has a lot to do with also retaining and keeping staff and building a really strong school culture. But I think one of the things that I've learned along my journey and working alongside others in schools and districts is just about how professional development opportunities can be really powerful catalysts of positive change when it comes to topics like hiring, recruitment, and retention. And so what I've observed is that you can have some really strong and transformative PD opportunities. And this can also be the thing that makes people stay or the thing that makes people go. So I think it's really important to think about what professional development opportunities you're providing for your staff in your school community. And I think transparently for me, it's been the thing in the past that actually has had me step away from organizations, right? Where I just didn't feel very developed and like I was actually utilizing and optimizing my skills and my assets and my talents. So there's a resource and a professional development program that I absolutely love and adore, and it's called Positive Intelligence. And it's a program that focuses on building high-performing teams in order to experience shared transformation. And when you think about that, when you think about a school community that has a high-performing team, shared transformation, right? You're not dealing with as many retention issues, right? You're thinking about not having to hire for as many roles, right? When you have this cohesive team. So I know Candice is going to share that resource and the B-Suite team a little bit more about that. There's a document I have to share that has all of the goodness within it of what the program is and what it does. And so I'm hoping that helps folks out there. And I'll look forward to hearing from folks if they're interested in learning more about that particular program.
So much, Lindsey, for sharing. Next, we're going to hear from Nikeitha. She's worked extensively in leadership development and organizational change. What is one resource or tool that you think school leaders should have in their toolkit?
So my tool is more of an equation of things that you really need to ensure that you have a strong recruitment and retention strategy that leads to impact. And so I would say these two things, the sum of being fully transparent in what you're offering. So really knowing what your total value proposition is as a school, having that as a 1 or 2 page and being able to actually present that to candidates. Combined with being intentional on what you're seeking, what are the core values that we're looking for in candidates? What are the qualifications, the essential qualifications that we need that on day one, that they can be excellent in front of students and in front of other adults. And once you have those two things combined, you as an organization, you as a leader can be very deliberate in the design of how you're going to recruit your next educator. And so I think of that equation really allows organizations to find your top talent and being adaptable throughout the process. So say for instance, I've worked with schools that have positions that are really hard to fulfill and they hire heavily on potential. Find other options, whether you're partnering with another organization or you're doing fractional staffing to get top talent in there because one, our children deserve it and they also deserve the opportunities that come along with that. And so I would say that would be the strategy that I would leave with educators and leaders that are a part of the recruitment process, because as someone has already alluded to, that talent is everyone's responsibility.
Absolutely. It absolutely is. Thank you, Nikeitha. And then finally, Brittany, with your extensive experience in talent and culture operations, what tool or strategy have you seen make a huge impact on recruitment and retention efforts?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So one strategy that I love is, like Candice said earlier, talent is everybody's job. As school leaders, you know who your rock stars are per grade level, if you're in elementary and don't break it up that way. Ask them to come to recruitment events with you, right? It is such a bright spot for candidates to be able to hear from somebody who works at your campus, somebody who is potentially on the grade level that they will be on and is just living in that work every day. And you can also use your rock star as a gauge for like culture fit, right? They know the rest of their team. They know if this person is going to be successful with the students that they're going to serve. And so I will just say that relationships truly, truly matter. And so get your teams invested in the hiring process alongside your leadership team.
Thank you for sharing. All right. I have a quick resource I'm going to share with everyone, and this will also be added to that blog post. So I mentioned earlier that I believe that having a strong candidate profile is really the foundation to a strong hiring process and finding the talent that you're looking for. And so I'm going to share with you all, excuse me, the candidate profile that I have used. And I am trying to get that up right now, but I don't think that's working. Sorry, bear with my technical difficulties. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm just going to highlight a few pieces on this. This profile is pretty expansive. There's a lot in here, but again, it is a very clear and intentional foundation to hiring. I mentioned earlier, making sure that we're clear on what the core competencies are for each role, what those qualifications and experiences are. This is the key to everything, right? We need to know what it is that we're looking for, and that will help you craft what your process is going to be. It will help you craft what your interview questions are going to be. And it also provides, as Lindsey was mentioning at the very beginning, lots of clarity and communication, transparent communication with the larger school team, and who, not just the hiring manager, but who's going to be working with that person as well. In this particular template, we also include core mindsets. So what does that person need to believe or value or commit to? And those are the pieces that are aligned to your school's culture and vision, and how you all operate as a team. We also include in our profile information about the day-to-day of that particular role, and any like nuances or details about what that person would be doing, what their goals might be, what success in that role would look like. If we understand what the end is supposed to be, we can build all the rest, right? And we do that with curriculum. We do that with our students all the time. So why not do it in our hiring processes and talent as well? So that is my resource. And as I mentioned, I'll make sure that that is shared in our blog. And thank you to all of our panelists, for the resources that you shared. They are absolute game changers for building strong, resilient, and inclusive teams. So I'm excited to share more with you in that follow-up blog post. So keep an eye out for an email after today's session with links and resources and tools that we've talked about today. So now that we've talked about some strategies and tools to improve your hiring process, I want to take a moment and introduce another resource that I think can provide immediate relief during hiring season, and that's fractional staffing from the B-Suite. So fractional staffing is a flexible solution that allows you to bring in experienced professionals for a specific period of time. So whether that's a few months or for a full school year, at B-Suite, we specialize in connecting schools like yours with equity-centered talent leaders who can step right in and get to work right away. And guess what? All three of our panelists today are fractional leaders and members of the B-Suite. So if you are interested in learning more about their expertise and connecting with them to get some hands-on support, definitely let us know. We are here to help you figure out what your hiring season can look like and help you build the right hiring process and get the right tools in place. We are also offering a free 30-minute strategy and coaching call. And if it's with me, it might be a little longer than 30 minutes if you need it, but where we can talk about your school's unique needs, brainstorm solutions together, and share recommendations tailored to your challenges. So whether you decide to work with us or not, you would walk away with some actionable steps to move forward. You can book your free call using the QR code that is on your screen. All right, so now it's time to hear from you all. So we're moving into our Q&A portion of our Suite Talk, where we're going to tackle whatever your most pressing questions about recruitment, retention, and everything in between. So if you haven't already, feel free to drop your questions into the chat box, and we'll make sure that we answer as many as we can. Let's see what we have already. Oh, also I'm still sharing. Stop that. All right, so one question for the group. What are some effective strategies for retaining staff during a competitive hiring season and a competitive hiring market right now? And you all feel free to jump in wherever you see fit.
I can chime in here. And Candice, can you just repeat the question one more time? I want to make sure that I'm...
Yeah, absolutely. What are some effective strategies for retaining staff during a competitive hiring market or in a competitive hiring market?
I'm going to go back to the resource of the strong stay conversations. And I think Nikeitha had mentioned that in an earlier segment of this webinar, where I think it's really important around what types of questions you're asking in those particular conversations, and being able to explore what motives and challenges and where your staff member may have areas of opportunity, right, that exist. So questions such as, what do you enjoy most about your work here, right? What are you most proud of accomplishing while being a part of this team, right? What are some challenges and pain points that you're facing in a particular role? What areas of growth or opportunity or development would you be interested in, right? And how could we do better as a school and a community? And I think when you're asking those questions, you're really getting to the underlying root causes that are motivations for that particular staff member. I think that can be really important, not to just have the conversation, but to execute also upon the responses that you're receiving from your staff members with those very targeted and important questions within those day conversations.
Absolutely.
I love this whole idea of like relationships. I tell educators, you really have to know, you have to have the pulse of what's going on in your school community. What are their needs? So having those ongoing check-ins, having those anonymous surveys, culture surveys throughout the school year really helps you build an effective strategy. So really knowing the needs of the community, and that leads to relationship building.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question here, what advice would you have for filling hard to staff roles that might be in specialized areas?
I can jump in here. So one thing that I've seen schools be really effective with is potentially filling those hard to staff roles internally, and then backfilling whoever you took, right? If you have that level of expertise on your campus. I do think that it is a little easier to move your internal folks, right, and have them really concentrate versus looking external for a role that you already know is hard to fill. Now, on the flip side, if that role is difficult to fill, I think and you have to fill it externally, I think being very clear about what your EVP is, so that you can entice candidates early and often.
Mm-hmm. And the question I would pose is, why is it difficult to fill? Is it different credentials that are needed? Is it because of the school community? What is the reason why this role is being difficult to fill each and every year? And really just taking an audit of your recruitment process. And so I think once you have an answer to that, why is it being difficult to fill, you can know which strategy or which direction you would need to go to find the best talent for that role.
Yeah,
That
is a fantastic point. Oh, go ahead, Lindsey.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to just chime in here and talk about talent pipeline, right? And so how important that is to continually, consistently have a talent pipeline. If you know there are hard to fill roles, how are you prioritizing and proactively, right, addressing for those particular roles and having a really strong talent pipeline already set up in advance? So that makes it a little bit, right, easier to have to manage that process as opposed to reacting, right?
Being proactive is definitely the key.
Can I add on to something Brittany mentioned in the
absolutely
role clear for leaders? I just thought of an example when there is a vacancy and we cannot find someone externally. And so sometimes schools make the mistake of we're going to select an educator and combine these roles. And so what happens? That overwhelms that educator. It frustrates them, and it doesn't lead to high impact teaching that we would like to have. And so just building on what Brittany's already mentioned, ensuring that that person's responsibilities is still feasible for them to make a high impact. So it's not and do this. This is your new role. This is the redefinition of your job description. And so just keeping that in mind.
Yep. We have a new question here. What SOP or standard operating procedure template do you recommend to help with training that would be easy for continued tracking in the face of turnover or changing roles? I think I understand that question. And I would say I don't think I'm not thinking of a particular template. at the moment. But if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think this is where technology really comes into play. I think a lot of times schools, particularly smaller schools or single site schools, shy away from leveraging different platforms because of the perceived time it might take to implement it or manage that. But I think when we're talking about, tracking candidates or tracking retention and things like that, something like a project management tool, like a Monday or an Asana or something like that, where folks can have within your leadership team, like consistent and easy access and transparent access to all the information, and something you all can reference or even create dashboards and look at the data, right? Like that's one thing that we haven't talked a lot about today, which is the recruitment and retention data is incredibly important, but you have to have a way of tracking that, and we can't necessarily do that on paper. We could try, but having some sort of platform or something like that where we can track all that information would be incredibly helpful. And I forgot what I was about to say, but other thoughts folks have on this particular question?
And the only other project management software that I've seen for high-lows of candidates is Airtable. I've seen some organizations use Airtable as far as creating the candidate's profile. That has been helpful for them.
I absolutely love Airtable, and Airtable has some fantastic templates, and it's pretty easy to get that up and running, and it's also not a very expensive platform either. So great, fantastic recommendation with that one. Checking my time here. I think we have time for one more question. What strategies? Oh no, actually we already answered that question. What technology do you all recommend for streamlining the hiring process or streamlining interviews? We talked a little bit about one-way video platforms earlier, but are there other tools that you all would recommend?
I would just double tap to the video, virtual kind of video, one-way video interviews. And I think one of the ones that I worked with before is called Spark Hire, which is a pretty flexible and intuitive system to use. And it's just really, I think, easy to use platform for, I think, both the hiring team and the candidate, and also really can speak to and get to the information that you need in a pretty comprehensive way. So I would just double tap, Candice, on what you mentioned and just naming a specific actual platform in Spark Hire that I've used before that really works well.
I would say one of the platforms that I love the most is Greenhouse. I feel like Greenhouse is very user-friendly for both the hiring team and the candidates. And I'm not quite sure, don't quote me, but I do believe that Greenhouse does sync with Spark Hire so that you can incorporate that one-way video.
Yep, Greenhouse definitely does. And I would recommend for a one-way platform, we use HireFlix. I like Spark Hire. I think HireFlix is a little more user-friendly for candidates. It's a little more simplistic in getting set up and getting started with the interview. It also integrates with Greenhouse and a lot of other applicant tracking systems. I would also say if you are a school that is hiring more than a couple of roles a year and you do not have an applicant tracking system, please get one. It speaks to the data piece that we were just talking about. It speaks to transparency and communication, and can house all of your hiring process, and keep you all moving forward with candidates and making sure that folks don't get dropped in the process, which is something that happens a lot when you aren't utilizing some sort of tracking mechanism. If an ATS is not for you, I definitely think, as Nikeitha mentioned, Airtable is a fantastic option. It is like a spreadsheet, but beyond, and it's a fantastic tool. Nikeitha, anything you want to share?
No, I love the ideas that have been shared. I second that. If they do not have a tracking system, now is the time to get one.
Yeah. And a lot of platforms also offer fantastic discounts to nonprofits and schools, so make sure you ask about that. as you're, evaluating what tool you want to use. So these have been some fantastic questions, and I love the conversation that we have here. If we did not get to your question or you have other questions after the session, you can always follow up with us afterwards. And remember, we're also offering that free 30-minute strategy and coaching call to dive deeper into your specific challenges. So just click that, scan that QR code right there on the screen, or go to thebsuite.co to book that call. So this has been an incredible Sweet Talk session. A huge thank you to our amazing panelists for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. So a round of applause to you all. Thank you so much. From retention strategies to recruitment tools and resources, we have covered so much. And I hope that this helps you tackle hiring season this year. So a couple of takeaways from today's discussion. Retention, it's the key, it's the foundation. Before you recruit, you have to focus on keeping the talent that you already have and having meaningful stay conversations. Streamline your process, leverage tools, leverage tech, and leverage strategies like video interview platforms and talent dashboards that will help you save time and make hiring more efficient for your team. And define your employee value proposition, or your EVP. Clearly articulate what makes your school a great place to work, whether that's professional development opportunities, a strong commitment to equity, or supportive team culture. A compelling EVP is going to help you attract and retain amazing talent. And then lastly, we try to think outside the box a little bit. Hard to fill roles, they do exist, but make sure it actually is a hard to fill role. And if a team is stretched thin and you need additional talent support, reach out and get it from solutions like B Suite that will bring in seasoned professionals like these amazing women on this call today to help you ramp up for hiring. So with that said, we know that hiring season is a huge lift on school leaders, but we are here to help. So to take today's conversation further, I invite you again to book that free 30-minute strategy and coaching call. You can chat with me about whatever's on your heart and mind about recruitment, retention, and anything in between. It is a chance to work directly with me or a member of our team to refine your recruitment strategy, get feedback on your hiring plans, and walk away with some actionable next steps. So visit our blog at thebsuite.co to access all the resources that we discussed today, to explore our services or to reach out with any questions. So thank you all so much for the amazing work that you do every single day to support your schools and your communities. I thank you for spending time with us today in today's Sweet Talk, and take care. We'll see you the next time.